If I had stopped that day, maybe the story would have turned out differently. The sentence echoed inside Amani's mind as she stood outside the old Nairobi library, the place where her quiet truth waited for her every evening. She took a deep breath and walked in. This was where everything had begun, and maybe where it would someday end. Amani was a simple girl, one of those people who carry questions in their eyes but never complaints on their lips. Her life moved in a small circle: home, university, library, and back home again. But inside that small circle lived one name that followed her everywhere: Zuberi, whose name meant strong, and he truly was strong in every way. He carried confidence like it was stitched into his skin, always the center of every gathering. When Zuberi laughed, people leaned closer, and Amani only, watched from a distance. Their first meeting was not dramatic, not something worth telling in movies. One ordinary afternoon in the library, Amani dropped her book and Zuberi picked it up and handed it to her. "Is this yours?" he asked. Amani only nodded. At that moment, it was just a question for him, but for Amani, it was the first time her heart spoke out loud. From that day on, she chose seats close to his table, not too near, just close enough to feel his presence. Zuberi talked to everyone, he laughed with everyone, he helped whoever needed help, and Amani, she listened, she observed, and she hid her growing feelings between the pages of borrowed books. Slowly she understood the truth. This love belonged only to her. It was one-sided, silent, and invisible. Then came the day that cracked her heart without warning. Zuberi was sitting with his friend Malik, and Amani was arranging books on a nearby shelf when she heard him say, "Man, I'm going to propose to Naila tomorrow." The name Naila slid into Amani's ears like poison. Naila was the brightest girl on campus, her smile like sunlight, and her world completely different from Amani's. A book slipped from Amani's hands and hit the floor. Zuberi turned around. "Amani, are you okay?" There was concern in his voice, but only the kind reserved for friends. Amani forced a smile. "Yes, I'm fine." But she wasn't that night. She asked her heart the same question again and again. Why her? Why not me? Silence was the only answer. The next day, the campus buzzed with excitement. Zuberi looked confident, ready, as if the world followed his plan. Amani watched from a distance as he called Naila over. Naila smiled and said yes. Applause filled the air, and all Amani could hear was noise. She held her tears inside, letting them fall silently within her chest. That evening the library was almost empty. Amani sat alone at the same table where everything had started. Zuberi walked in. "You've been very quiet today," he said. Amani looked up at him, and for a moment she felt how easy it would be to tell the truth, and how dangerous. "I'm just tired," she replied. Zuberi smiled warmly. "You're a really good friend, Amani." The words were meant as kindness, but they felt like punishment. She lowered her gaze, because if she lifted her eyes even slightly, her love might become visible. And that was when Amani's story took a turn, because love, when endured in silence, either breaks a person completely, or slowly turns them into someone unbreakable. Some feelings demand a name, otherwise they keep screaming inside. The silence of the library felt heavier than usual, and Zuberi's words still echoed in Amani's ears. "You're a really good friend." That single sentence became the boundary she was never meant to cross. That night, when she reached home, Amani stood in front of the mirror for a long time, studying her own reflection, eyes full of unsaid questions, a face trained in patience, a pain no one had ever truly noticed. For the next few days, Amani tried to distance herself from Zuberi. She changed her study hours, sat at different tables, avoided familiar paths, but the campus was small, and memories were everywhere. Zuberi was everywhere too, laughing beside Naila, standing confidently among friends, belonging so naturally to a world Amani felt she was only observing. Whenever Amani saw Naila, she didn't feel jealousy, she felt absence, as if something that was never hers had still been taken away. Naila was vibrant, alive, her laughter warm and effortless. She looked perfect beside Zuberi, as if their roles had been written long before they met. Amani watched them together and remained silent, because she knew her love had no future. Yet every night her heart whispered the same quiet prayer: maybe, just maybe, Zuberi would one day feel her presence. One afternoon, Zuberi stopped her outside the cafeteria. "Why don't you talk to me much anymore?" he asked. Amani hesitated. "I've just been busy," she replied. Zuberi studied her face, searching for something. "You've changed," he said softly. Amani smiled, but it never reached her eyes. People change, she said, situations don't. After that, Zuberi began talking to her again, maybe out of habit, maybe because he needed someone who listened. For Amani, every conversation became a test. She stood close enough to hear his voice, yet far enough to protect her heart. She knew that once her feelings escaped, there would be no way back. One evening rain poured over the campus. Zuberi and Amani stood beneath the same shelter outside the library, watching the waterfall. Zuberi spoke first. Do you like the rain? Amani nodded. It's loud, she said, yet somehow it brings peace. Zuberi laughed. You always say strange things. Amani looked at him and thought, if only you could understand. That night, Amani opened her diary and wrote, I love you, Zuberi, but only for myself. Tears stained the page. She had learned that love, when hidden, does not fade, it deepens. The next day, whispers spread across campus. Zuberi and Naila were having problems. People talked, stories grew. Amani heard everything, but felt no joy, only fear. She sensed that this story might lead to another kind of pain. That evening, Zuberi called her. I need to talk to you, he said. Amani's heart began to race. Now? She asked. Yes, he replied, you're the only one who understands me. And in that moment, Amani felt her life standing at another turning point, because when the person you love begins to see you as their refuge, love becomes heavier, more dangerous, and far more difficult to survive. Sometimes the relationship that isn't yours claims the deepest right over you. After Zuberi's call, Amani barely slept that night. Her mind kept circling the same thoughts. What would he say? What would she do? How much more could her heart carry? By morning, she forced herself to look strong, but inside she felt fragile. Zuberi was waiting for her near the fountain. When he saw her, a familiar calm crossed his face. Thank you for coming, he said. Amani only nodded. Zuberi took a slow breath. I don't think Naila understands me anymore, he admitted. She's very different, and I'm tired. Amani listened, each word landing heavily on her heart. She wanted to say, I understand you, but she swallowed the truth. Differences happen in relationships, she said quietly. Maybe time will fix things. Zuberi looked at her. Why are you always so mature? Amani gave a small smile. Because sometimes there's no other choice, she thought, but didn't say it. From that day on, Zuberi began sharing everything with her, his frustration, his anger, his confusion. Amani became his safe place, and that safety slowly turned into her greatest weakness. She buried her feelings deeper each day. People on campus began to notice how much time they spent together. Some smiled, some whispered. Amani avoided every gaze, because she knew if the truth surfaced, everything would collapse. Naila changed too. She laughed less, and whenever she saw Zuberi close to Amani, complaint was written clearly in her eyes. One afternoon, Naila stopped Amani outside the restroom. You and Zuberi are very close, she said directly. Amani's heart pounded. He's my friend, Amani replied. Naila studied her face. Just a friend? Amani lowered her eyes. Yes. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Naila paused, then said, sometimes friendship is the most dangerous thing. And she walked away. The words stayed with Amani like a warning. That evening, Amani thought for the first time that maybe she needed to step back. She was becoming easier for Zuberi, and losing herself in the process. That night, she closed her diary, because there was nothing left to write except pain. Then came the moment that changed everything. Zuberi and Naila were arguing in the middle of campus. Voices were raised. People stopped to watch. You always say Amani, Amani. Naila shouted. What's your problem? Zuberi snapped. The problem is that you're giving her the place that should be mine. Amani stood at a distance, hearing everything. Her body went numb. For the first time, her hidden love was spoken out loud. Naila walked away, and Zuberi turned and saw Amani. Their eyes met. Guilt filled his face. You heard everything? He asked. Amani nodded. Yes. Zuberi ran a hand through his hair. I never wanted you to be caught in this. Amani looked at him and thought, I've been caught for a long time, but she only said, maybe we should keep some distance. Zuberi stared at her. You too? Tears filled Amani's eyes, but her voice stayed steady. Yes, she said, otherwise someone will break. And in that moment, Amani pushed her love away with her own hands, because sometimes the greatest form of love is choosing to walk away before everything shatters. Distance is not always measured in steps, some distances grow from heart to heart. When Amani spoke of distance, she didn't realize how heavy that word would feel to Zubri, stood silent for a moment, then asked quietly, "Are you leaving me too?" Amani's heart trembled, but her eyes remained firm. "I'm not leaving you," she said, "I'm protecting myself." Zubri had no answer. He turned and walked away, leaving Amani standing there rooted to the ground. From the next day onward, everything changed. Zubri spoke to her less. The library table they once shared stayed empty. The rain still came, but they no longer stood under the same shelter. Amani had chosen this distance herself, yet living with it opened a new wound every day. She could sit in class and still feel his presence, then remind herself gently, this was never yours. Zubri and Naila's relationship continued to fall apart. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. People said Naila had grown insecure, that Zubri wasn't the same anymore. Amani heard it all, but felt strangely hollow. She pulled her life back into its small circle, home, university, library, but even the library now felt like a place filled only with books, not belonging. One evening, Amani received a message from Zubri. "I need you." Her breath caught, she stared at the screen for a long time, then placed the phone aside. For the first time, she chose her heart over her habit. She had learned the difference between being needed and being loved. That same night, Zubri sat alone by the fountain, where Amani once sat beside him, remembered how she never interrupted him, never judged him, realized she had become his comfort without him ever asking what it cost her. For the first time, he saw his mistake clearly. The next day, Naila confronted him. "Do you love me, or do you love Amani?" The question struck deep. Zubri hesitated. "I'm confused," he admitted. Naila laughed, but pain filled her eyes. "Confusion is also an," answered Zubri. And she walked away. After the breakup, Zubri seemed lost. He skipped classes, withdrew from people. Amani watched from a distance. Love is tested when you can reach out but choose not to. She wanted to hold his hand, but she knew returning would erase everything she had fought to save. Weeks later, Zubri stopped Amani. "You were right," he said. "I was filling my loneliness." Amani met his eyes for the first time without hope. "Understanding is a step," she said, "but not every step leads to the same place." Zubri asked softly, "Can we be friends again?" Amani smiled gently. "Some connections cannot return to where they once were," she replied. "Old wounds wake too easily." She walked away, leaving Zubri behind. That night, Amani opened her diary again and wrote, "I am not losing, I am choosing myself." Tears fell, but this time they carried calm with them, because letting go of a love that erases you is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. Some silent choices become the loudest victories of a lifetime. Amani had chosen herself, but choosing herself did not mean forgetting. Her days on campus still carried echoes of Zubri's presence, his name floating through familiar places like unfinished sentences. Every morning she reminded herself that missing someone was not weakness, but returning to what broke you would be. She slowly changed her routine. The library no longer felt safe, so she found refuge in the art room. Painting became her language. Colors spoke where words had failed. Each stroke carried emotions she had never voiced. Those who saw her work said, "There's so much depth and pain in this." Amani only smiled, because pain had been her longest companion. One day the university held an exhibition. Amani displayed her paintings among others. Zubri attended. When his eyes fell on one canvas, he froze. A tea showed a girl standing behind glass, watching a boy holding another girl's hand outside. No names, no faces, yet the truth was unmistakable. Zubri walked away without a word, but the image followed him long after. That night, for the first time, Zubri admitted the truth to himself. "I lost her," he whispered, "because I understood too late." Amani's words echoed in his mind. Not every step leads to the same place. He realized he had leaned on the right person at the wrong time, and taken her presence for granted. Meanwhile, Amani's life began to take a new shape. She cried less, thought more, and learned to sit with herself without fear. She understood now that love was not only about choosing someone else, but also about refusing to abandon yourself. Her kindness remained, But it now came with boundaries. Then came the email that changed everything. Amani had received a scholarship to an art institute in South Africa. It felt like a door opening into another life. She cried with joy, this time without pain. She thought that maybe some people enter your life only to guide you to the next turning point. Zuberi heard the news from Malik. Amani is leaving, he said. Zuberi's heart skipped. When? In 2 weeks. Silence followed. He knew that if he stayed quiet again, there would be no second chance. The final week on campus felt heavy. Amani spoke little, smiled softly. She believed goodbyes didn't need to be loud. Sometimes leaving quietly was kinder. Zuberi watched her from a distance, collecting courage he should have found long ago. On her last day, Amani sat alone in the library at their old table. Zuberi walked in. "You're leaving," he said. "Yes," she replied. "Without telling me?" he asked. "I did," she said gently, through my silence. Zuberi's eyes filled. "There's something I need to say." Amani stood up. "The time for saying has passed, Zuberi," she said, "and the time for listening too." She turned to leave. He called her name. "Amani." She stopped but didn't turn. "Sometimes," he said, "people become heroes of their story too late." Amani took a deep breath. "And sometimes," she replied, "a story doesn't wait for a hero." She walked away, leaving Zuberi standing still. He realized then that the love which once saved him had finally slipped from his hands. But the last page of the story had not yet been written, because some decisions take you far away, yet bring you closer to who you truly are. Some stories are completed by leaving, others by staying unfinished. Mornings in South Africa felt different to Amani. The air carried unfamiliar freedom, the sky seemed wider, and for the first time in her life she felt entirely her own. The Art Institute was alive with color, expression, and untold stories. Here, no one knew her through Zuberi's name. Here, she was simply Amani, whole and self-defined. At first, loneliness followed her quietly. Every new city speaks in silence before it learns your language. At night, Amani often sat by the window, thinking about what might have happened if she had stayed. Then she reminded herself that staying would have meant losing herself. That thought gave her strength. With time, her art began to gain recognition. There was honesty in her work, a pain that felt real, and a silence that spoke loudly. People asked her, "How do you feel so deeply?" Amani would smile and say, "Some emotions are meant to be felt and released." She knew exactly where those emotions came from, but they no longer controlled her. Back home, Zuberi's life had slowed. He felt stuck in memories, unable to move forward. Finally understood that Amani had not just been a friend, she had been his mirror, showing him his confusion, selfishness, and delayed understanding. The clarity came too late, but it came truthfully. One evening, Zuberi saw photos online from Amani's exhibition. The title read "Healing in Silence." His hands trembled as he smiled through tears. He realized she had turned pain into purpose, while he was still learning how to let go. Years later, Amani returned to her city for a short visit. The library still stood the same, but its silence no longer hurt. She sat at the old table and closed her eyes. For the first time, she felt no ache, only gratitude. Zuberi walked in. Their eyes met. They said nothing at first. Sometimes the deepest conversations live in silence. "You look well," Zuberi finally said. Amani smiled. "I am well," she replied, "and that's the difference." Zuberi lowered his gaze. "I understood everything too late." Amani answered softly, "But you did understand, and that matters." Zuberi hesitated. "Do you think we ever could have?" Amani gently interrupted, "Some stories exist only to become memories." There was no bitterness in her voice, only certainty. They walked out of the library together, then separated at the doorway. Amani didn't look back, she no longer needed to. The love that had once lived quietly inside her was now safe within her, untouched by regret. Zuberi watched her walk away, and for the first time, losing something brought him peace. Understood that true love is not about possession, but protection, even from a distance. And so the story ended, not with reunion, but with growth, not with promises, but with acceptance. Saw a girl who loved in silence and found herself. A boy who understood too late but learned honestly. and a one-sided love that remained incomplete, yet somehow whole, because some loves are not meant to be lived, they are meant to change you forever.